So, hello everyone. Thank you for continuing with us in this session. I'm Karina Caro. I'm an assistant professor at the Autonomous University of Baja California in Ensenada, Mexico. I was part of the technical track committee for the conference, and the next talk of the session is a thin line between love and K8s. We were very excited for this talk because Kubernetes is a hot topic and an amazing open source tool that can possibly transform a business and its IT outcomes. So it is my pleasure to introduce two amazing experts of this topic. On this topic, Rachel Leekin. She is a Kubernetes field engineering in the Modern Application Business Unit at VMware, and Ramona Jackson, a product portfolio director supporting the Advanced Bottle Management System program at RISE 8. Welcome.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Thin Line Between Love and K8. If you do not know, A Thin Line Between Love and Hate was a 1996 rom-com that chronicled a young man's unfortunate run-in with a woman who was very attractive but had some deep, dark secrets.
Excuse me, Rachel, can you change to the presentation view? Oh, thank you.
Yes. So what we want to talk about today is kind of how Kubernetes is a little like that woman that he had a run-in with. Very sexy. It's a buzzword in the industry. But what we find is that once you actually get it into your environment and you put it in front of your developer and infrastructure community, it may or may not be what you thought it was. So as Karina said, my name is Ramona Jackson. I'm the Director of Product Practice for RISE 8 and a former VMware employee in the MapBU business unit, where Rachel Leekin is currently. And I have my LinkedIn information there, but my Twitter is too hot for cable, so it's not shared. Rachel?
Thanks, Ramona. Yes, I'm Rachel Leekin, and I'm a senior solutions architect now. I've moved roles recently. I'm currently at VMware, and I was formerly an IBMer as well. You can find me on LinkedIn, and my Twitter is not too hot. It's quite boring, so you can follow me there as well. So before we kick off the topic, I want to set some context around the differences between containers and VMs, right? So you probably have heard this kind of conversation before, like with customers, or if your developers are talking about, should we go with containers or VMs? So I just wanted to set some context. So containers are emerging practices, right? They're newer, they're based off of microservices, they are lightweight, they start up very quickly, and they require less resources. On the other hand, VMs are more traditional in their approach. They're more associated with monolithic applications. They require large OS images. It takes minutes to start up. And of course, they're more resource intensive. The pro of containers is that it has a very, a very quick approach to get customers going. But one of the cons is that with this quick approach, the ecosystem is still evolving. So you're not going to have as much support out in the community. On the other hand, VMs are more established, so you'll have more robust support from the larger ecosystem. And when we talk about containers, there are a lot of different container types or solutions. In this case, we're going to talk about containers in the sense of Kubernetes and how Kubernetes orchestrates these containers, because that's what Kubernetes is. It's actually a container orchestrator. So why Kubernetes? Well, Kubernetes is this big, vast thing, right? You'll probably hear that a lot. But what happens, the one important thing I would say out of Kubernetes is its control loop algorithm. So you can go out and GitHub, as you know, Kubernetes is open source. You can go out and check out the code yourself. So I always suggest people to go check out this control loop algorithm that it has, which is basically what it's trying to do is you as a developer, system admin, whatever persona, you're trying to reach a desired state. So you will give Kubernetes your desired state, and then Kubernetes will try to constantly get to that desired state. So it checks the current state and says, hey, it's not at my desired state, I'm going to adjust. And then it checks it again, and then it checks it again, right? And if it is at its desired state, it's fine. It just keeps looking for it just to make sure nothing goes wrong. Another key component of Kubernetes is that it has an extendable API system. So what do I mean by that? As you can see in that picture is from the Cloud Native Cloud Foundation website, which shows basically the landscape of all of these great tools, cloud native tools that can connect with Kubernetes. It actually makes Kubernetes more robust when you actually use these platforms. So for example, if you have a customer that's trying to do monitoring of their infrastructure, there is one of these tiles here has a monitoring solution for your customer. And it's not just one, it's maybe 4, 5, 6 solutions out there that your customer will have. So that's really what makes Kubernetes great and flexible for your customers. Now, where is Kubernetes? I get this a lot from customers. Kubernetes, I've heard described as infrastructure plus plus, PaaS minus minus. It's really a thin layer between both infrastructure and application. So what does that mean for your developers and your operators or system admins? So I look at it as it empowers your developers, right? So now they don't have to reach so far into infrastructure to get their applications running. However, from an operator standpoint or a system admin standpoint, they could view it as a barrier to applications because now it blocks them from having direct access to the applications. And this conflict is also kind of a love-hate relationship of itself. And that's where we see customers battling to install that thin layer of Kubernetes. And we also see in the next case coming up that this thin layer was not actually good for the customer and their use case. So I'll pass it over to Ramona to take us through the customer case.
When we think about Kubernetes, you often think about it as a part of a digital enterprise transformation strategy. So everyone's looking to take something old and make it new, to be able to open up new opportunities for their businesses and provide more value to their end users. But what most people don't understand that taking a more traditional or waterfall-like approach to transformation isn't always the way to win the race. And when you say Kubernetes, I often consider it one of the new 3-letter words or the new 4-letter words without the extra letter, meaning that it's something that's used all the time in the ecosystem, but not everyone really understands what it is. So when we talk about transformation, I like to describe it as we used to in VMware as a balance or a dichotomy between drivers and outcomes. So transformation looks very different depending upon the factors within your business ecosystem or your system of systems. Your drivers are most often surrounded around how you make revenue, how your expense picture looks, what your time to market looks like in comparison to your competitors, and then what your risk appetite is. And then from an outcomes perspective, it's centered around how you view agility, how you view mobility for your internal ecosystem and your end users, and then how you view security. Now, to kind of bring this into the picture, we want to look at an actual case study for a customer who said, hey, I've heard of Kubernetes, let me implement it. So while I was at VMware, I worked with a customer, Novant Health, very great customer, had a small IT footprint or DevSecOps footprint, but was looking to solve a problem where a lot of their commercial off-the-shelf stateless applications weren't working with their Tanzu application service or VM-based infrastructure or platform. So what they ran into when they looked at transformation through Kubernetes was first the resourcing challenge. Transformation takes people first and foremost, and it has to be the right people. They didn't necessarily have the necessary subject matter expertise within the Kubernetes space to be able to enable, train, and stand up the platform or the platform plus infrastructure plus applications in a timely and effective manner. Process can be a vacuum. When you're dealing with a VM-based setup where there's a lot of developer experience, applications or tie-ins or plugins in your system, when you move to a Kubernetes setup, you have to think about how processes will change and what you'll need to provide to developers who may not be necessarily ready for that sort of transition. And planning for that can sometimes get in the way of your actual implementation. And lastly, it could be the right technology, but the wrong context. We love K8s, but not all the time that K8s loves us in the same sense of the thin line between love and hate movie. Where we are today as an organization and how we're set up from an organizational perspective, from a resourcing perspective, from a knowledge perspective, and where we'd like to be tomorrow must inform our decision to move to K8 or possibly to some other setup. So how do we choose with all of these factors? I think the biggest thing to look at is outcomes. We want to make sure that we're looking at how we are going to change behaviors internally to our organization and possibly how we might need to change behaviors externally with our end users. And the best way to look at those outcomes are with those three that we talked about before: agility, mobility, and security. Agility, of course, is how quickly we want to be able to move in response to change or challenges or even opportunities. Mobility allows for people to access apps and data in real time, whether that's for our internal workforce or our external end users. And then security includes the measures and systems designed to protect and safeguard our data and our information. So in order for us to be able to look at how these outcomes will change or delta plus or minus for organization, we have to understand what are the metrics, how is the way that we're going to measure our success for these outcomes if we make the move to Kubernetes. And I've listed here a couple of great metrics or measures to measure yourself against as an organization to decide whether or not Kubernetes is the right thing for you. Return on the investment, or ROI, is always one of the first things I ask organizations to think about or analyze. So if we make this investment in K8 and the extensible API ecosystem that will need to be added onto it to make it productionalized, what will that look like for us from a revenue and expense perspective? How will this affect our ability to deliver and the flow metrics that we have in place for our DevSecOps org? How will this affect the quality of the work that we're producing? What will change from our automation framework? How will the flow of features, outcomes, and so on and so forth be changed by introducing Kubernetes, as far as how we'll intake work, how we'll manage our innovation channel, and then how we'll productionalize and provide that to our end users? What will usage look like once we institute Kubernetes for our end users or our internal user base? Will this affect, from a security perspective, how we track known vulnerabilities and respond to those, or how severe those vulnerabilities will be now that we have a new security framework in place? And then how will we be able to recover from any instances where we may be vulnerable within this new framework? And the thing that I like to let people know when they're looking at these outcomes, they're deciding what measures to select is your current state. What you have today in your arsenal drives transformation. So you're taking something old and you're making it new. But your future state, what you'd like to do, drives innovation. So this might be something that you've never done before, which is okay, but you still need to consider where you're trying to go from an outcome-based perspective, and then how you'll measure your success, because you don't know that you're successful unless you are able to measure how you got there. So to wrap it all up, we want to give you the TLDR, the too long didn't read, and I'll let Rachel go through the highlights from her portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Ramona. So yeah, just to summarize, once again, containers and VMs both have a place in the IT system, right? But you have to understand what works for your situation, right? Back to what Ramona just said, what about your innovation and transformation? It all varies on your use case. Kubernetes is a declarative nature, right? It's always trying to find your desired state, and its ecosystem can propel enterprises into a love relationship if you take advantage of all of those API systems available to you as a customer. Kubernetes is also, once again, also a thin line between, pun intended, between both infrastructure and applications. And once again, you need to take advantage of the ecosystem in order for your developers and your sysadmins operators to be completely happy and in love with Kubernetes.
And to that point, it's important to understand that experimentation is the mother of transformation. You're not always going to get it right when you're looking to add to the Kubernetes ecosystem, the right monitoring tools, the right deployment tools, the right CI/CD tooling and services. So you'll need to test and try things with your user base and determine what works best for your organization. Don't do it because everybody's doing it. Not everybody needs K8s in their environment to be successful and be able to deliver value to their end users. Some will thrive in a container-based setup. Others can stick with VMs, no problem, and still do very well. Know your drivers and your outcomes and measure them often. If you don't know why you're doing a thing and what that effect will have, what will be the effects on your enterprise and the outcomes or behaviors that you're looking to change internally within your org or with your end users, and measure those, then you won't know whether or not you've been successful. And lastly, remember, current state drives transformation. It informs the way that you will make things better or transform your digital enterprise. But your future state, the things that you want to do that you might have never done before, drives innovation. Totally okay to transform an existing container setup through Kubernetes or some other containerized based system. But if you've never done it before, you're looking at an innovative setup and you want to make sure that you have the right measures, the right outcomes, the right drivers in place for your organization. And that's it.
Thank you, Ramona and Rachel. I think we have time for some questions. I don't know if there are questions. No? So thank you for your talk. So only a reminder, so please rate the session in the Guba app, and the closing keynote at 4 p.m. So yeah, joining us. So thank you so much.